Hello, everybody. I am here today with another one of Anansi's strategists, Michaela Kemp. Now, Michaela and I had a conversation about a year ago, but we have brought her back to talk about some topics around imposter syndrome and empathy and connecting with clients and establishing yourself as the expert. I am super stoked. Welcome, Michaela.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be back.
Yes.
With a goal and a focus.
I know. Last time it was more just about introducing you, hearing your story. Today, we're going to talk about some of your expertise in terms of what you've actually learned and your time as a copywriter and your time at Anansi and just handling client projects all the time. But before we get into that, my first question is, what would you say your superpower in business and in life is?
I have always had like a phenomenally high embarrassment level, which means like I have a resistance to it, which sounds like a weird thing, but it has given me the power of not being afraid of public speaking because I mess up all the time. I've had my most embarrassing moment happened during a play when I was 13, the most awkward age, in public, and you just roll with it. And so I've always been very good at not sort of dwelling on my own awkwardness or stumbles.
That's awesome. I really like that because that's not just a superpower, that's actually taking something that like could be a weakness or something that holds you back and actually turning that into something that is a superpower and into something that actually like moves you forward and helps you do more with the world. So that's really cool.
Yeah, awesome. I think we talked about this on the last forever ago. I think we talked about it where I was like, it's that I am this way. I can't really fundamentally change my personality or core being. So I'm just going to harness this and use it to my advantage.
Yeah, and I really like that, like I'm a huge fan of the problem is the solution. Anyone, including you, Michaela, who's hung out with me, has heard me say that a million times. But it really is true, right? Like these things that hold you back, they can actually be the strongest way forward, weirdly enough. Awesome. And why does the world need more of that superpower? Why does the world need what you do?
Oh my gosh. I have worked with, been friends with, interacted with so many people who, I don't know, our whole topic today is imposter syndrome and sort of confidence and finding empathy. And that's definitely something I struggle with. But, I've worked with so many people who kind of hold themselves back because they're afraid of messing up or afraid of being embarrassed or afraid of getting called out. And I've dealt with this with clients too, where like they're afraid to put what they do out there or be too confident about what they do. And I'm like, I will push you in this direction. Like, it's okay. It might not be your website content forever. It might not be what you do forever. And you should probably change it and evolve it. But, I think having that push to not be afraid of those like embarrassing struggle moments and kind of just harness it. Like, it's all good.
I love that. That's our whole fail fast value, right? It's all about failing fast and adapting well. So, if you're afraid of, we were talking about this on another interview recently, if you're afraid of failure and you never try or never put yourself out there, then you will never succeed. But if you can just be like, well, you know what? I might fail. I might fall on my face. I might look silly, but I'm going to freaking do it anyway. Gosh darn it. Then you will get a lot further towards mastery or success or excellence because you're not
Absolutely.
afraid.
Yeah. It's just changing even how you say the sentence where it's like, what if I do that thing? Okay, but what if you say like, what if I do that thing? Like, what if? Like, what are all the positive things instead of getting stuck in the like, but what if I do it and it fails and it crumbles and I look dumb and people don't respect me or I'm sure 1,000 other things, but what if all the good things happen?
So how do you find this applies in your project work? Like, how do you harness this with clients? What sort of kind of challenges do you face with them being unwilling to put themselves out there? And how do you help them overcome that?
I've had a number of clients actually who are afraid to stand out within their industry. And sometimes I think it comes from a place of, I've worked on several projects in like the medical industry, and they need to have a certain amount of fitting in so that they look, qualified and competent in what they're doing. And that's completely fair, except part of really strong content and really strong marketing and having a really strong brand is this is kind of what everyone else is doing, and how are you different? And it doesn't have to be, this whole rebellious, like we're tearing down the industry. It just has to be confidently saying like, I'm different because a lot of people expect people in the medical industry to be quite scientific and rigid, and I'm really personable. And it's like, great, that's a huge skill. I've also just dealt with, I think my very first project with Anansi, the clients I was working with were just so like timid. And it was like, I had to pull out. I was like, yeah, but the fact that when people call you, you answer the phone and you're excited that they called is a huge skill, is a huge like main messaging point, amazing thing that you do is that level of personality. So it's, it's convincing them to kind of harness even the little things about themselves.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is that people sometimes what they're good at or what they excel at might even seem like easy for them, or like it's not a big deal, or like anyone could do it. And so they're afraid of putting themselves out there and being like, this is what I do, or this is how I do it. When in reality, it's not obvious to the rest of the world, and their particular audience might really value that. And there's actually a lot of advantage to be had to daring to be different, so to speak.
Yeah. And it doesn't, I think, again, like talking to people about how this might not seem massive to you, but is it something that you're getting a lot of comments or compliments on? Are people noting the fact that you always pick up the phone, or are they noting the fact that you never miss a meeting, or you, always send really diligent follow-up email, whatever small thing you do that's just part of your routine. Like if people are picking up on it, that's what kind of makes you special, and sort of pushing people to harness what seems like something so small as kind of a cornerstone of who they are in terms of their marketing has been challenging. But when people trust you and they go for it, those projects have always been really successful.
Awesome. And what are some of the ways that you can help people kind of see this? I'm hearing that, showing them that through their audience's lens, certain things are important can help bridge that gap. But what are some of the ways that you like build trust with clients and kind of help them get over their fear of standing out and trust you as the expert, basically?
Still working on that for sure. Yeah, I mean, that's the big question is you are going to get people that simply just aren't going to take your word for it, and they want to play it safe. And you just at that point have to be respectful of their decision. Ultimately, yes, I know it's not going to work as well, but they've, I guess, paid me to write this safe content. That's fine. Yeah, convincing people, a lot of it comes out in the strategy portion of what we do. So I've had a lot of people talking through like our deep dive interview, and they're talking and they're like, wow, like I've now done a little bit of work with, the digital agency. We've done interviews with them, and now I'm talking to you. And like that repetition and sort of that branding work and that having to talk about yourself, I think a lot comes out there. And then we actually get to putting it in a document. They get to see like it broken down into 3 points, or, I try to do like 3 bullets for each thing. And I'm like, this is what resonated with me as a complete stranger to your business. The other thing I've started doing kind of recently, maybe in my last 4 projects or so, is doing a bit more research into their industry and saying things like, we're not going to use these words because I saw them on literally 10 different websites in your industry. So we're going to use a different way to maybe say that same thing, but we're not using empower. We're not using stuck in a coaching thing. You're not going to get unstuck. I don't like the word killer. It's a great descriptor, but it's just everywhere. And sort of giving them those moments where it's like, this is how we're going to be unique, and this is how we're going to be you. And, taking that extra time to research and show an investment in what they do has really made the process easier for me and for them, I'm sure.
Absolutely. And I'm curious, so through like a digital leader's eyes, or like through a partner's eyes, are there things that they can do kind of upfront to start laying the groundwork for that trust and that expertise, like before you even come into the picture?
Yeah, I think, I mean, so much of what we do is simply setting up expectation. So when it comes to the partner, like before they even meet us, I always like when, even if we're, you know, white labeled or not, I like when they're really open about like, this is going to be your copywriter, your strategist, whatever. They're really clear that we're a part of the process and you're going to meet this new person. Because one of the hardest deep dive interviews I had to navigate, they knew I was coming in and it was fine. And we were maybe halfway through the interview and I thought it was going great. I was like, I did so much research. The partner had tons of great notes. Like I came in focused with specific questions. And partway through, the client was like, but you don't know us. Like the partner takes time to get to know us. They do interviews where we just chat. Like we don't have that with you. And I instantly knew that like I was starting from square one building trust. And so having those conversations around like, I'm listening to your previous calls or I'm taking those notes and again, on my part, doing that additional research. So having it be kind of an assumed part of the process. And I always talk, again, white labeled or not, like, you know, we're just part of the same agency. Like I work with you, we're in this project together. Like we're very united front. And I think coming across like that, you know, from day one on the partner side can really help.
So what I'm hearing from you is that the partner can really help make the process with you as a contractor or copywriter a lot smoother by, first of all, just communicating about you as part of the team and showing that, you know, you may not literally be the person who has done calls with them before, but you are getting that information. You're having those conversations. You know, you are part of that process, even if you're not like literally the person that you're seeing. And I'm also hearing that they can really just set some expectations around your role and what you're going to be doing and kind of like what you're bringing to the table and really just like introducing you as a person who's part of the team and part of the process from the beginning. Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it helps my brain. I think it helps just to, like, I rarely run into a block where people are not convinced of my skills. I run into a block where people are not convinced that I'm as invested as they want me to be. And I don't know if that's just the type of industries I've worked within. But, you know, I don't think I've ever, maybe like once, had someone question like, oh, well, how can you know, like, how can you write about my company? You know nothing about me. And it's like, okay, well, I just did all this research. You know, it's more that investment. It's more that layer of, I'm also here. I also care about not just my chunk of the project. I care about like getting you
Your
copy
success.
that is valuable to you.
Awesome. That makes a lot of sense to me. So I want to shift the conversation. I know we chatted a little bit before we turned the record on about imposter syndrome and how that kind of pops up. And I know from experience that like literally everybody who does a job experiences this at some point or another. Certainly I have never had a client who has not expressed at least some level of imposter syndrome. So I'm curious, in your own words, you know, what is it? How does it affect your work in copywriting? Maybe even how does it affect the clients and partners you work with?
Yeah, that's actually one of the cool things when I was doing a little bit more research into it, where it affects literally everyone and it affects men and women almost equally. There's really like, it's the great unifying work anxiety. Yeah, I think the best description for me is it's kind of twofold to me. So the first, you know, is just that like inability to internalize your success or your wins. So something will happen to you and it's right place, right time. Oh, that sure was lucky. Or wow, they had to promote someone, so it might as well have been me. Instead of being like, wow, I worked really hard and I showed up and I got promoted because of my own merit and skills, and I am deserving of that win. The other side of it is that you'll kind of be discovered as not good enough, not qualified enough. And I think that's like the failure end of imposter syndrome, where, you know, you'll mess up once and they'll be like, wow, why did we hire you? And then it's just the devastating end of everything. Might be dramatic, but
yeah, but that's kind of what it feels like, you know,
like that, yeah.
Especially like the anticipation, because this rarely actually happens, right? But it's this feeling like, oh, they're going to discover that I'm faking it. You know, even though most of us are not actually faking it, you know, like we're here doing this work literally as our job, day in, day out, creating results and success. But it's crazy how it can still kind of niggle its way in. I know people in my family catch me all the time, like just saying little things, and they're like, like,
yep,
you worked hard for this and that you deserve it. And the like fruits of your labor are coming to pass. I'm like, oh,
I guess you're right. Yeah.
Okay. And how has this like how has this impacted your work again, like either in like projects or your mindset or et cetera? Like, what does this look like in practical terms for you?
I think doing more research and trying to kind of qualify what this is, you know, how this functions for myself. And honestly, some conversations with you where I've had those world-ending failure moments where I felt like everything was collapsing. I was like, say, what do I do? It's actually mostly affected my relationship with like the partners we work with. So the agency owners, who have been honestly quite a lot more, I guess, humanized almost would be the right word. Because I assume, like, you know, you're the big agency owner, you've hired us, like it's almost like, you know, you're my other boss kind of thing is how I used to think about it. And now it's like, again, the great unifier. Everybody is struggling and everybody is reacting inappropriately because they're emotional and they're mad and they just said something that was too sharp, or they're non-communicative because they're just struggling because they're getting 5,000 emails every day. And to me, I'm like, you know, that's, you know, well, just, you know, run, like you chose to run an agency. And I had a very like not empathetic attitude towards it for a little while. And now it's like, wow, like this is what's going on. And so now it's about kind of being like, I think we all struggle with that success, failure, imposter syndrome, and finding that empathy where it's like, hey, even if I don't say it, even if I don't get emotional and everything's still quite, you know, rigid professional, you can still say, like, you know, like you said at the beginning, here's my solution. This is what I think the problem is, but like, I'm going to start with, are you okay if I do A, or would you like me to do B? You know, check yes or no, and make it really simple. And changing the way I communicate has been so helpful.
So what I'm hearing from you is that even though you work with partners, you work with clients, you know, these people are like hiring you, hiring us, and there's this temptation, I'm hearing kind of twofold. One is this idea is that, you know, they're paying me and therefore, you know, their words and their opinions have this value because I want to please them. But I'm also hearing that once upon a time, there was a little bit more of an assumption like, oh, they must know more than me. Like they must have all the answers. They must be the ultimate expert. And what I'm hearing is that that's kind of evolved where you recognize, oh, I am the expert in these things. And therefore I'm going to put forward some suggestions because I actually know what will be successful in this circumstance. And also understanding that like they're human too. If they're dropping the ball or things are going on, etc., they're probably just as afraid that it's going to send everything crashing and burning to the ground. And they're also just a human who's going through their experience just as much as you are. Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely that change from asking them if something is okay, like, oh, should we do this? I don't know, like that very kind of unsure and not wanting to step on any toes, to, hey, this is what we should do. I do need you to approve it because this ultimately is your client and your project overall. This is what I'm going to do, you know, yes, no, you literally can send me that. You don't have to send me a full email. Great, thanks. And yeah, it's just really streamlined. But that's also like my own imposter syndrome creeping up too. Like it's just everywhere where I'm like, I don't know, can I just make a suggestion? Are they gonna get mad? Like I have that mine manifests in that way where it's like I'm almost afraid of getting in trouble like a kid is.
And what are some of the things, over the years that you've learned to help overcome that feeling and do like take that action and take that initiative and be the expert you are?
I think the biggest, you're going to love this answer, Say, it's to focus on the process part and not the fail or win part. It's the journey. Yeah, it's, imposter syndrome is very black and white. It's very, you either succeed or you fail. There's absolutely no middle ground. There's no, you did a better job than last time and now we're improving. Not hitting your absolute success goal is a failure. And so it's finding, like, focusing on the process. So focusing on like, okay, great, like this is how I did it. This was the work I put in. I did more research. This is how I changed my approach, because literally every project it's slightly different. And it's figuring out, even if it's not a set process, it's focusing on how I got there. And then I do compare to like other projects where I'm like, okay, well, this one was really breezy and successful. So what did I do here? And focusing on like the things I have the power to change and within that journey, and then not being as, afraid of the success or failure. To give an example, I used to write content literally with the goal of, this is perfect. This is going to be their final content and they're going to approve it on the spot because it's so good. And that was my goal. And if that didn't happen, which, spoiler alert, basically never ever happens, even if the content's really good, that was a failure. And again, it's end of the spectrum failure. And now I write with, okay, I've done my research, this is laid out in a way that is strategic, I have all the pieces in there, I've pulled all the details from their bio, like I have this sort of checklist of elements, and then I just sort of send it out into the world, and then I'm just clear about, this is a first draft, this is the type of thing I need your help with as the client. We'll come together and work through everything on our editing call. Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is that you have basically, like, the pattern that I'm hearing through all of this is that you've had to let go of a lot of attachment to perfection in order to embrace excellence. So, and I think all of us overachievers maybe have this challenge, and we are all overachievers on this team, perfection actually can be the enemy of success, because what I'm hearing is that because you're holding yourself to this intensely high level of perfection, anything less than that is a total failure. Mm-hmm. Well, there's very little room to grow in that. There's very little room to, actually improve things over time and adapt within, as you said, what you can control. Mm-hmm. Because the fact is that sometimes you can also do everything right, so to speak, and still have it go wrong because of things out of your control, So I really like that. I'm really glad you brought that up about just letting go of that like attachment to everything being the best it can possibly be, and embracing how can we have an upward trend of, just making things better every time, observing what went well, observing where things didn't go so well, and adapting.
Yeah. And it's not about like, you can't change. There's so much out of your control, whether it's, a win or a loss. But, if you're focused on those elements getting there, then it's like, okay, great. So I know that I can work on these pieces within this process. And that's something tangible that, again, I can get better at, I can work on. We can improve that wording. We can, improve how I'm communicating with the client and how I'm communicating with the partners. And, that's all stuff that you can change. And that's quite empowering. The word. But it is like, it makes you feel, I guess it makes you, and this, because it's all about being productive, but it makes you feel more productive, which I think is probably the best I can hope for. As like, I always feel like imposter syndrome and perfectionism are like, first cousins. If I can feel productive, which still is not the most positive, like you shouldn't always have to be productive, but that's kind of the best I can like hope for in terms of not having to have that horrible, like, this isn't perfect and so it's terrible. It can be, this is really good and you've done these things, and if the client doesn't like it, you can work through it because you know that it's strong going in.
So more like consistent growth is what I'm hearing, like productivity implies that you kind of always have to be doing something. But what I'm hearing is that you always want to be growing. Like you always want to be embracing that you can make something better and come back to it and navigate the situation. And that instead of putting your trust in this thing that you've done, I'm even hearing maybe that you're putting more trust in yourself. And, you know, just kind of lost my train of thought a little bit there. But yeah, instead of putting the pressure on the thing that you're producing to be perfect and carry all of the value in it, you are recognizing that your expertise and your person, you know, all of the skills and stuff that you have internally actually have a ton of value on their own. And you can lean into that and know that you will be consistently improving and getting better, even if a specific thing that you deliver is not perfect in itself.
Absolutely. I think I'm also getting better at, you know, learning not necessarily how to take critique. I did creative writing sessions with, you know, some great, some not so great other university students who would provide all kinds of critique, from, I hate this font, it looks pretentious, thanks, that's not helpful, to, you know, really amazing constructive criticism. And so it's more learning like where that reaction or critique is coming from, and then also whose critique to listen to. Where it's, you know, obviously in a work situation, you are kind of walking this balancing act of, is the client happy, is the partner happy, am I sort of you know, working within the Anansi process like I need to be, you know, what's all happening here. But ultimately there have been clients who have torn apart sections, and you just know those aren't good suggestions. And you know that taking critique from, you know, somebody who doesn't do marketing and writing and branding is not like taking that personally and holding that deep within you is not constructive, and it's not going to help you. But perhaps a partner who specializes in branding and provides you with critique and is like, you know what, I think this is it. That's the person I'm really going to listen to, and I'm going to take their lead, and I'm going to be like, okay, great. This is how we need to improve here.
So how then do you navigate, you know, because clients often want to give a lot of feedback and stuff. And so how do you navigate establishing yourself as that expert and kind of saying no to feedback versus when to just kind of accept it, even though that you know it's maybe not the best option?
Currently, I've adopted the kind of need to say my piece. So like, I totally see what you're adjusting here. You know, the reason that I wrote it this way is ABC. So for example, a lot of people, not a lot of people, but I've dealt with a few clients who don't really understand the like why we sort of format the story, the narrative of like conversion copy. And so it's like, okay, well, just like, well, I've read, you know, 400 words and you haven't even talked about me yet. And it's like, well, the reason we do that, you know, like the client doesn't care about you yet. Like the person reading it, they don't care. You haven't shown empathy to them. You haven't, you know, convinced them that they have a problem. You haven't done the groundwork. You know, like, you know, Donna's story brand is like, this is your first date. You haven't got the second date yet, or you can talk about yourself. And it's, you know, after saying that, if they're still just like, absolutely not, then, you know, I might push back. It kind of depends on the client too. Like I've had people who, once you explain it to them, you have that nice ground level of trust, and they go, oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, no, keep it how it is. And I've had people who will like fight you to the death on it. And those people, I usually just sort of say my piece. It's on a recorded video call if they ever come back and want to debate it or dispute it. And then we find some kind of middle ground that works for the client and also I think will still be effective.
Okay, so I'm hearing that, you know, as you said, sometimes people just want it a certain way and they want it a certain way. But by talking about the why, the how, the kind of goals behind it, the reasons you made the choices that you did, it sounds like you can help them kind of see more of the context around it. And maybe even if they still don't like that particular word choice or that particular structure, you can find something that's more palatable to both of you, let's say, in the sense that you still know in your expertise that this is going to achieve the desired effect or connect to the right people or achieve the conversion or et cetera. But you're also working with them to find something that, you know, feels a little bit more comfortable to them. And if they're not open to that, you're at least explaining why so that they can make that decision informed.
And I think this calls back to just feeling invested in them, and them feeling like you have their back. Is it's like, I totally hear your concern. I get why you're getting, you know, I don't know, defensive. I've also called back simply to other projects. Some people find it helpful to be like, you know what? It's really normal for people to have this like kind of gut reaction to their content because it's not exactly what you would say about yourself. And that's kind of the point. But also, you know, I get that, especially if you are, you know, a solopreneur, a smaller brand, and you're doing so many things yourself. It's that extra layer of, you know, I hear you, here's me sort of exerting my expertise and explaining like this has worked for, you know, A, B, C, D, all these clients. Like this is sort of an industry standard way to do things. And this is why it's laid out like this. And if you still are absolutely not, you know, ultimately it's your copy, but kind of, you know, like give me a chance. Like it's using all of your tools to try and like convince them. I spend a lot of time sort of convincing clients to like do what is best for them.
I'm hearing, you know, one of the things that kind of stuck out to me there is about helping people feel heard. Now, I'm hearing that kind of a key element to showing them the value in doing things a certain way is not just explaining to them why you're making the decision, but also helping them feel heard so that they do feel confident. They do feel that trust that you're in it for them, not just for, I mean, I'm not really sure what agenda you would have for wanting to write it a different way other than for their benefit, but who knows, you know, they've got their own experience going on, is helping them understand that you do care, you're listening to their concerns, and you might still say no or might still express a concern or push back or set a boundary, but you're still taking the time to help them feel heard so that they understand that you're not just trying to steamroller over their will or their desire.
Well, and that boundary and that no is often a really good, which is definitely the moment that I deal with, you know, feeling underqualified, is when I have to be like, no, I know what that moment where, you know, a lot of people hear that and they go like, oh, of course, like it's that moment of authority. And a lot of people react really well to that. It makes them feel like you are taking care of them and you're almost going to like not save them from themselves, but you know, you're invested in making this as effective as possible and also have it resonate with them. And there's always that like balancing act.
Yeah, so I'm hearing that actually quite the opposite of people being really resistant when you step in as the expert. I'm hearing that people actually really appreciate that a lot of the time because they are actually feeling, oh, okay, this person does have my best interest in heart, so therefore I can relax and let them make some of these critical but like specialized decisions because it is what they do. You know, that's why this person is here. That's why you're there.
And I think speaking to their authority too has been helpful, where it's like, you know, whatever industry, okay, you're an accountant. That's something I know only enough about in that I have written several websites for bookkeepers and accountants. So very surface level. I don't know what you do, and sort of appealing to that, like, I don't understand your world, which is again why I need your help. You know, and it's always phrased like that, you know, I need your help bringing in those specifics and doing the things. But in terms of like the structure and the way we're going to write it and why we've chosen, you know, even to use like stylistic fragments or like it can be really nitpicky things. The reason we've done that is because that is an effective way to sort of write what you do and sort of, this is my world and this is how I understand it. And calling back to that, because almost every single like industry like that, like an accountant or a web designer, all of our biggest struggle tends to be people not valuing what we do. So all of us have this sort of, oh, that, yeah, anybody thinks they can be a bookkeeper. Anybody thinks they can jump on and be, you know, a copywriter. And they probably can with the right, you know, training and experience. But, you know, calling to that kind of like, hey, do you remember how we had a conversation about how this is how your clients were? Kind of maybe just don't do, like, you're doing that right now a little bit to me, and, you know, put the trust there. Like,
Yeah. So hearing once again, and this is actually really interesting because Max brought this up when I was interviewing him as well, which is this understanding and also explanation of this is my world, this is your world. You are an expert in your world, and that's why I'm interviewing you and getting all this information from you and etc. But also I am an expert in my world, and so I encourage you to respect that expertise and respect my capacity to actually direct you and help you get where you want to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've had to have, I had a pretty black and white conversation with a partner one time where the client was being really like, my way or the highway about it. And I just straight up asked, I was like, you are your main focus with content is conversion. I cannot write the best conversion oriented content because the client is, you know, their way or the highway. How much do you want me to concede? And ultimately they were like, our biggest concern is that our client is happy and that the project continues to move. So basically you can just let the conversion element go, write something that is, you know, good, but more reflective of what they want. And sometimes you just have to have those moments where, you know, you put in those words, those extra modifiers and those things that you're like, oh, like if I read this, I would just be so turned off as a consumer, but they're stoked on it and great. Sure.
Yep. Sometimes again, you can do all the right things and still not win. Yeah. Okay. Are you ready to wind into our lightning round?
Ooh, sure.
Yes. Okay. We'll see. Yeah, we call it a lightning round, but I usually
do it.
Ramble a little bit. It takes a little bit longer. All right. Other than coffee, what gets you up in the morning?
A great question. My alarm. No, I don't know if I have like a specific thing that gets me up. I'm very much a lazy morning person. So I think what gets me up is just this, like, I get to kind of start another day. A few years ago, we moved to a place that, you know, we really super love living in. So I just get to like grab my coffee and walk out on my back deck. We have little newborn baby deer in our yard like every morning right now. And I just get to kind of like have this nice, peaceful, reflective moment of like, yeah, this is nice. And then I'll like start my chaotic day. But that moment of peace before the day starts is what gets me out of bed.
Excellent. Also, somebody I interviewed recently said something very similar. I don't know. I don't think she has baby deer to gaze upon every morning, but she was like, yeah, my me time in the morning,
that
like
moment.
before shit starts hitting the fan. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right. And what is the number one thing that you do to preserve your wellness?
Ooh, mine is, I guess, somewhat practical. So I deal with anxiety and all of these cool things. And so when I was, I think 19 or 20, I had a really great therapist, and I have literally like an am I okay, am I processing checklist. And it's extremely base level and extremely practical. And for me, it's just mental because I've been doing it for so long. But it's, when's the last time you had water? When's the last time you had like an actual real meal that had, you know, 3 food groups or four food groups and like, you know, all of these things. How much sleep did you get last night? And then, okay, great. Like then at that point you can dig into like, once you've covered these 3 basic needs, then it's like, okay, maybe that's why you're reacting this way. Maybe that's why this is, you know, a lot worse of a critique than you thought. Maybe that's why you're, you know, struggling here. And honestly, most of the time, if I like chug some water, have a shower, and eat some food and come back 20 minutes later, it's like whole new person.
Awesome. Yes. Oh, I am so aware of how easily things can go off the rails mentally. I am someone who
Ugh.
struggles quite a bit with my mood and my perceptions and all that fun stuff. And, the thing that I've come to realize, I think similar to what you're saying here, is that things go off the rails. They do. If
Oh
you try
yeah.
to prevent them from going off the rails, you will be unsuccessful sometimes, because sometimes they do. But you can always bring things back, even if it's just a little bit, by like taking care of your basic needs and like doing the things you need to do to be calm, safe, and okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Are there any last words of wisdom that you want a digital leader who is listening to this to walk away with?
Oh, great question. These are big lightning round questions. I think in terms of imposter syndrome, the thing I regret the most about kind of caving to all those feelings is that it has directly limited me from, pushing for more success. So because of this, I didn't ask for that promotion, or I didn't stand up and request, this job, or I didn't even apply for that job. It prevented me from freelancing for a really long time, which is something I now love doing. And it's like, I think that is the most sinister thing about it, is it's not those perfectionist, fail, succeed, black and white elements of it. It's that not doing anything and not pushing for more because you'll fail.
So the opportunity cost is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
It's not just the thing you're working on failing. It's the things that you're never going to get to do if you don't kind of lean into the discomfort and act through the fear.
Absolutely.
Very well said. Thank you so much for sharing.
Oh,
All right, Michaela, and
glad.
why don't you tell the audience about how they can find out more about you if they are curious?
Obviously, on the Anansi website, we all have our own amazing little bios there. We all write blogs. But yeah, check us out. I try to work video games and pop culture in as relevantly as I can possibly make it. Sometimes to more or less success.
Well, I personally love all of your pop culture references. And to any of our listeners who are not aware, if you have not been on our blog before, anansicontent.com/blog. And our strategist Jam, as we like to call them, JAMM, Jazz, Anam, Michaela, and Max, all take turns writing blog posts. And so every week they are giving more value about real things that they come up against with partners, with projects, etc., and ways to basically make your life a little bit easier and help you elevate the work that you're doing, so you're not just constantly putting out fires all the time, but can actually like do the work that you love and make a bigger and better difference in people's lives with less stress. So check it out if you haven't already. All right, Michaela, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm so glad. It can be hard to get vulnerable and to talk about the things that you fear, especially in a medium that is, possibly going to be some of the people that you're working with who hear it and stuff. So I just want to doubly thank you for being vulnerable, for sharing. I do think this is something that I certainly navigate and struggle with on a day-to-day basis. And like I said, like you said, you did the research. Every single freaking person
Everyone
deals with this at some point or another. All right, to all of our listeners out there, as always, thanks for tuning in. I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. If you can, step outside, take a deep breath of air, and just, even if it's just a moment, I hope that you can nurture a little bit of peace in your day today. Take care, guys.